Well, starting to think maybe it is so for adults as well. Yes, I think it may be.
And one question is, how do I root that back into kind of my church life?
Yeah. Well, the answer is we all have to live somewhere. None of us actually live in cyberspace. You can't eat bytes. These are you have to be domiciled somewhere. You have to shop somewhere. You have to cook somewhere. You have to sleep somewhere. And I would want to hold out for the necessity of belonging to a worshipping, praying, witnessing, serving community where you are. But if that then extends to encourage other people to do the same, fantastic. Yes?
Talk about community. I technically live in Ripon and technically, physically gone to the same church as Nicola David. I'm more connected to some people here through this. End of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose the force of that depends on the adverb technically, more connected. Yeah, as a bishop, I know quite well what you're describing. There are many different contexts in which I have to operate, which are real physical, real-time, real-world, real people contexts. And then other contexts that I get into, there is a sort of sigh of relief of, actually I know this one much better, I feel more at home here. And some of those would be cyberspace ones. When I'm talking with my peers within the Biblical Studies Guild, who may be in Australia or America or wherever, or even Africa, I would like to think there not many of them are. So it's not an either or. It's got to be a both and. What I think I'd be pleading for is for the both and not to get too far apart from each other, because I do think that ever since the Enlightenment, Gnosticism has been one of the major prevailing temptations within Western modernism and postmodernism. And I do think that something about cyberspace could be colluding with that. I've written about that in various places. And if Gnosticism is the question, there's probably a good answer for that, because we may have become too materially focused within some aspects of modernity. And maybe we need to reconnect with other aspects.
My sense is that the conversation is going well at the moment. There's lots of issues that are here. So Andrew and I are suggesting that we continue the conversation for just a little bit, if that's all right, Bishop Tom. To keep going. Rich wanted to make a point.
Is there? Yeah. Sort of slightly staying with the geography theme, because I think I definitely agree with you about affirming geography and place and creation and new creation as a theological theme. But also I'm thinking a lot about the theological themes around the coming together of Jew and Gentile in Paul, and the messiahship of Jesus as a non-nationalistic thing. And I wonder if one of the things about the internet seems to me really powerful is that or at least it has potential to feed into the church, embodying that coming together of nations in Christ in a way that is tricky in geography. Do you see what I mean? And do you want to say something about that, maybe?
Which would be the Pentecost point, I'm just thinking this through. Nothing that I've said this morning is set in stone and is a kind of an ex cathedra pronouncement. It's simply delightful to ruminate on it. And I was worrying at one level about whether the digital revolution might be a sort of building of a Tower of Babel. Look, aren't we clever? We don't need God. We can do communication globally, etc. But equally, it could be, or could become, part of the answer to that, as Pentecost in Acts 2 is the answer to Babel in Genesis 11. So Pentecost is a way of saying, here are all these different languages, and we hear people telling in all these different languages the mighty works of God, which then is the explosion which carries out throughout the book of Acts. And maybe this is something which the church should make consciously and not kind of quirkily a matter for regular prayer. It could become just rather sort of, oh, aren't we clever, we're praying about the internet, though that'd be really sort of snazzy. But no, I think to pray for those who are engaging in today's and tomorrow's technological breakthroughs. I keep saying to my kids, figure out what the thing is that's going to come after the internet and invest in it now, and you'll be all right. And look after me in my old age. Of course, if we all knew that, in the nature of the case, we don't. But I do think we should pray for the people who are taking things forward, and pray for the right and wise use exploratory use of this stuff in the hopes that it could be a Pentecost.
So I'm in danger of telling my grandmother to suck eggs here, but you will, of course, be aware of New Testament exegesis that says Ephesians was mainly about the universal church. Well, just as you have said, in a way I'm agreeing, it's both and, because Ephesians affects the locale of the church in Ephesus, as well as, of course, making these grand claims about the universal Christ, in a sense. And I was reflecting on a book by Thomas Friedman that I mentioned actually here in this context, Longitudes and Attitudes, where he basically says, well, what the digital environment is a tool of globalization. And that globalization is really the big story, and digital environments help globalization. And in a sense, what was happening in our conversation was this tension, or unity and distinction between the local and the global. So we think local, we act globally. And the recent financial crisis has shown some pullbacks on globalization. The free market economy, actually, which has gone global, has some inherent problems, and there has been a pushback to the local. And I was just wondering whether that is it possible to think globally through the digital environment, but somehow find a way in which we pull back to the local and retain something of our local identity. So in a way, it's just a reflection.
Yes, and I suspect that's just a to and fro, a hermeneutical spiral, as it were, which we just have to go on going round and round and round. I mean, there are moves in this diocese, as you may know, people who are actually trying to do local vegetable growing in a world where more and more of the population assume that vegetables are things you buy in the supermarket. And people are saying, this is an unhealthy way to live anyway, and it may well become less easy in days to come if we're not careful. We should be literally rerouting now, and I think that's a sign of health and wisdom. Yes, the local and the universal, and we have to remind ourselves, reading a letter like Ephesians, that there were quite probably fewer Christians in that enormous city of Ephesus than there are people in this room right now. It may well have been sort of 25 or 30 Christians, and Paul is basically saying, you're the new humanity, guys. It's just so massively counterintuitive, and yet it's a vision to be grasped and lived. Yeah, I don't know that I've got much more to contribute on that. It's just I think the if it's real, it's local slogan, which people have said about many initiatives in the church over a long period, we have to be reminded of that again and again. Sorry, is my mic?
Yeah, and I'm just going to ask you as well, people who are making comments from the floor,
Sure.
you need